Welcome back to My BrainWise Coach. We are extremely excited to bring you another episode. And today, as you can see, if you're watching us on YouTube or Spotify, we have a special guest with us to talk about a really cool topic. But before we dive into the content today, I just want to say we have successfully now launched, I think, 16 or 17 total episodes on our podcast. And we've had some really exciting engagement along the journey. We've gotten comments that have come in from many of our listeners. We've got a couple of emails of information or questions that people had. And we are truly enjoying this journey of really understanding ourselves through a neuroscience perspective. And so if you're enjoying this podcast, share it, like it, comment, subscribe to it wherever you get your podcasts. Send us questions to questions@mybrainwisecoach.com if you want to know more. And invite those in your circle, both professionally and personally, to listen along the journey to see what they too might be able to take away from the conversation and the information that we're sharing. But without further ado, let's dive into the content of today. So we have Cheryl Kish with us today, and I'm not going to attempt to introduce her credentials and her experience because it is a really amazing story, but she is a personal friend and mentor to me. I've known her for many years, and she has helped me along my life journey. And so I'm so honored that she's joined us. And Phil has known her even longer than I have. So Cheryl, welcome to My BrainWise Coach. Thank you for taking the time to share with our listeners today. Take a moment to introduce yourself and tell our listeners what you do and why you do it.
First of all, thank you, Cole. Thank you, Phil. So fun to be here with you guys to chat for the next 45 minutes or so. So thank you for inviting me. My name is Cheryl Kish. I am the president and founder of Define Consulting. Define Consulting is a boutique executive coaching and leadership development firm that helps organizations turn leadership potential into really measurable performance and people legacy. So we partner, Cole and Phil, with companies across industries from hospitality, restaurants to manufacturing, design, healthcare. And our focus is really to build cultures of trust, accountability, and collaboration. And of course, our work is grounded in neuroscience and behavioral research, but it's also deeply practical. So that's a little bit about Define Consulting.
Thank you so much for sharing. I personally have worked with you for a number of years and seen how just truly transformational the things that you do. And so I know our listeners are going to get a lot of really great information out of this. But before we dive into some more, I want to know, Cheryl and Phil, you've known each other for, 20 years possibly. Where did you guys meet and how did your friendship form? Because I think our listeners are starting to really connect with each of us personally. So I'd love to know a little bit about that story.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Phil, do you want to go or would you like me to go?
I'm happy to. We met in Las Vegas, and that sounds way more exciting than the reality. I bumped into Cheryl, and I think you had the role of transforming a culture in a large organization. And we started off working together doing that thing. I think the first thing you did was have a presentation to the board of directors, if I recall. And we've had a lifelong professional relationship and personal relationship since then. So I think that was 2005, somewhere around there. So it's probably 20 years.
That's right. I spent my early career inside organizations before I formed Define Consulting in hospitality, restaurants, hotels, and as Phil just mentioned, casinos. And I was brought in to help transform a tired old casino into a new brand. And it was a culture transformation. And I met Phil, and together we did mission and vision work with the board of directors. We worked with mission transition teams. This was a year-long process before we even rebranded and reopened that particular property. And over the years, Phil and I have worked together with various organizations. And so we've partnered and collaborated in this type of work where it's culture work, people transformation work, that sort of thing. So even though I started in operations, it's always people that has fascinated me, and connecting with Phil was a perfect fit to help me continue on that journey 20 years later.
That's an excellent transition. And thank you for sharing that story to where did you get your start, Cheryl? Because as the listeners are hearing, you've had a really amazing career over the last number of years, and to the point where you've started your own successful consulting firm. So where did you get your start, and tell us a little bit about that journey?
I could go way, way back, but as I've mentioned already, it was in operations. So I started in the hospitality industry when I was very young. And I did a good job. And I went into operations management. I ended up in training and development, which I loved and still do love. And eventually in human resources, and as a vice president of human resources, training, development, talent management inside a large organization. But what always fascinated me, as I said earlier, wasn't just operations or strategy, but people. Why some teams could do extraordinary things while others with the same resources just couldn't seem to connect. Over time, Cole and Phil, I realized that the common denominator was leadership, not just skill, but self awareness, communication, trust. And I found myself drawn to helping leaders build that kind of environment. So I took everything I'd learned from years of leading inside organizations, the successes, the mistakes, the real world complexity, and then founded Define Consulting in 2002. The goal was simple: help leaders and companies connect the human side of performance with the business results that they're trying to achieve. It was inside the hospitality industry, and now, as we've talked about, has expanded across industry.
No, that's perfect.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah,
What
please.
do you like most about being a coach?
Making it the transformational part. When an individual or a team experiences true transformation, that is most often life changing. So if I can help facilitate that, because as a coach, it's really about facilitating, but the answers lay within. So when an individual or a team can dig down deep and the coach can help pull out the answers that are already there, help people do something with that, make different choices, show up in a different way, get results that they're trying to achieve, that's what I enjoy most.
It's awesome. And Cheryl, with that, what is coaching? Since, that's a big part of what you do. What is coaching, and maybe what is it not?
Yeah, thank you. So coaching it's not therapy. It's not training, and it's not even mentoring. Coaching is to go alongside someone or a team, I'll say an individual at this point, and to be there to help that individual, again, look deep inside, have some self awareness if they don't already, maybe they don't, and to help connect what maybe they were not aware of in their non conscious that has been not serving them well, has perhaps been driving behavior that's not serving them well. Now, I will say, and we might get into this, that our non conscious beliefs, they do serve us well as well. But in coaching, it's pretty much when is it not serving you well, because it's about growth and moving forward. So coaching is let's move forward. Let's look at future state. Where are you current state? You guys have talked about this, right? And what's the plan to move forward to that desired future state for you as a leader, an individual, a team, whatever that might be. You might have some follow up there, Cole, but that's pretty much it in a nutshell. How we do that, there's a lot of obviously technique and modalities and different exercises the coach will do.
And I think it can be both in a professional context, because I think you've mentioned executive coaching, right, as a big part of what you do within your consulting firm. But then additionally, there's this kind of personal coaching or life coaching. So can you tell us a little bit about the difference between the two, and why someone might want coaching on either side, or maybe it ends up being a combined experience?
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about the executive coaching first. Typically, in the executive coaching model, an organization, to be transparent, is paying for the coach's services, and the organization is wanting to provide support most often for high potential leaders that have been identified as having promise and potential. And now the company wants to pour more into and invest in that leader or those leaders. And it's most often, in my experience, because that leader is doing very well and the company wants to help that leader continue to move forward in that organization. Sometimes in executive coaching, executive coaches are brought in because there's a really strong leader, has done well up to a certain point, and we've all heard what got you here won't get you there. But that leader has hit a ceiling for whatever reason and is not progressing, but the company still believes in that leader. That leader has done well so far, but something is starting to get in the way. And so the coach is brought in to help that leader remove whatever it is, and so that they can move forward.
Mm-hmm.
With personal coaching, often it is someone reaches out on their own and says, I'm stuck. I feel stuck in my life, or I'm not sure of my direction, or I want to focus on being happier in my life or reaching my fullest potential. In my experience, it's been an individual will reach out. And I've done a lot of work in what I call transformational coaching. And that's where you help individuals visualize the best version of themselves in all areas of their life. And then through work, help them unblock whether it's beliefs or underlying commitments that are getting in the way of them actually achieving what they want in their life. Often, there is crossover in executive coaching. There is work in executive coaching where I help individuals realize again what might be going on in the background non-consciously that is getting them stuck so that they can move forward.
And I think for our BrainWise friends who are listening, I think one of the things to think about from your perspective and what Cheryl just said is, and we're going to do a little bit of a conversation here in a minute around mental models or worldviews, which we've talked a lot about on our podcast so far, Cheryl, and our listeners or our BrainWise friends were really engaged in that part of the conversation. But as you listen to what is being discussed, what are the things maybe from your perspective in your life, whether it's personally or professionally, are things going really well and want to boost in a particular area? Or is it, or struggling somewhere and having some additional guidance that allows you to think of things from an objective perspective and facilitate things, as Cheryl was talking about? Is there a space in your life where that might be something that you're looking for or that you might want to see to help you continue to grow? Because I think a big part of this is a lot of our listeners, Cheryl, are probably in a place where the personal coaching is something that is appealing for them as they move along their life's journey. And so we're going to give them, of course, a couple of little tidbits today that they can take away to begin doing some of that work. But then we'll, of course, always encourage, if there is a space where you feel like you're needing or you want to see some of that growth, what coaches are in your particular area that can help you along your life's journey.
So you've mentioned what goes on in the non-conscious brain. Could you give us a description of something you've done in the past to help an executive? Take us through a case study, for example, and also if we can then unpack it and take a look at what's going on in the non-conscious side.
Sure, I'd love to. Of course, all names, right, change situations, but every so often in coaching, you meet a leader who seems to have it all figured out, right? Sharp, strategic, capable. And then you realize the very strengths that built their success are the same ones quietly getting in their way. And that was true for, let's say, Scott. Scott was a senior vice president, fast growing organization, brilliant mind, disciplined, deeply respected for his results. But when his CEO recommended executive coaching, his response was, I remember, sure, if it helps my team perform at my level. And then that told me, Cole and Phil, everything that I needed to know. And so as we began working together, we uncovered what I call Scott's mental models, those deeply held, often unconscious beliefs that shape how we see the world. They drive our behaviors, our reactions, and sometimes our blind spots. 3 of Scott's stood out for me. The first was, if I don't control it, it won't get done, right? The second was, emotion clouds judgment. And the third, respect is earned by competence, not connection. Now, yeah. So these beliefs had served him beautifully in the early stages of his career. They made him reliable, efficient, and precise, but they also created this unintended pattern, a tendency to over control, detach when things got emotional, and equate vulnerability with weakness. But that's an example of how you might work with one and start to realize that things that got me to where I'm at are also getting in my way.
And so when you facilitated that with him, and he did it, was it you that pointed it out, or did he see that himself?
He saw it himself. I call it the life story exercise. Highly confidential, sacred ground. But I interviewed Scott and interviewed him through his entire life story from the earliest that he could remember to present day. And then the next step in my process, I try to get word for word as Scott shares his story. But the next step in this exercise is for me as his coach, as Scott listens, is for me to read in his words his life story back to him. Now, this takes several sessions. And I asked Scott or the coachee, right, as they're listening, jot down or ask me to pause if something really resonates with you as you listen back, right? What are the reoccurring themes? And so that's the process. And it is the coachee, it was Scott, as he would share back with me, wow, it really seems like when X was happening early in my life, this was happening, and it caused me to have this need for control. There's something about control and fear of not having control. No, it's not me identifying. Now, I am there to support, and if Scott were to perhaps miss something that I, as his coach, feel and want to suggest we should explore further, then certainly I will bring that up, and together we'll explore that further.
Yeah. And I can say, Cheryl, you and I actually did that mental models work together. You were my coach, still are in a number of ways, but it was really powerful. I've actually shared on our podcast a couple of my mental models, but one is I have to be the best, and then how I reframed it to my best is good enough. And I can only imagine the conversation with Scott as you were going along that conversation with him. I think people are going to want to know, how did Scott's story end, right?
Yeah.
But then once we're done telling that, what's a small way that maybe our BrainWise friends can apply the same mental models process in their own life? Maybe there's a quick activity they can do to identify some of those non-conscious belief systems, mental models, or worldviews for themselves. But first, let's talk about, how did Scott's story end? Where did it go, and how did it end positively, we hope?
Yes, it does, and it continues to. Scott and I explored what triggered these beliefs around control and weakness. For example, so it's starting to identify the triggering, and when the beliefs, first of all, now they've become what was non-conscious now becomes more conscious. So when a deadline slipped, he would tighten control. When someone pushed back, he would shut down empathy. When a mistake happened, his tone would grow sharp because respect in his mind was still linked to flawless performance. But he started to see it. And that's what we would hope for in coaching, the ripple effect. His intensity made his team hesitant. People stopped bringing forward half-formed ideas. They were afraid they'd never be right enough. Performance stayed steady, but innovation flatlined. So we went to work, and you've already mentioned the reframe word, reframing those beliefs. So instead of, if I don't control it, it won't get done right, Scott tried on, if I coach clarity and accountability, others can own results with me. Instead of emotion clouds judgment, he reframed to, emotion is data. It tells me what matters. And instead of respect is earned by competence, not connection, he adopted, connection builds the trust that allows competence to shine.
Wow.
Yeah. And the changes started small, but before meetings, he would pause and ask himself, what story am I bringing in? He'd slow down. He'd use communication models that we practiced. He would use emotional intelligence skills that we had been working on. He would start simple one-on-ones check-in, but it was remarkable. So to end the story, his team started mirroring his own calm tone. Conversations became more open, and he started being described as steady. What I love about Scott's story is nothing changed around him. Scott chose to change.
And is that a recent story, or does that go back a few years?
This one is fairly recent, I'd say in the last 8 months.
Oh, wow.
Well, I will say this though, change doesn't happen overnight. And what I described, this self-awareness part, takes several months of work to even get there, and the reframing. And then the hard work begins once you understand what's triggering you. And we should talk about the PTP as well, because that's very helpful in this process. Then it takes months of work for an individual to, now it's in the conscious brain, but it's still hard. I have to think about it as naturally until it does become more natural. But it's work.
And you've mentioned a couple of things about it becoming out of the non-conscious into the conscious. And one of the things we know about change is you can't do work with one or the other. You have to do work with the both.